Okay, so good evening for those of you that have joined. And what we are doing today is continuing with Unit 5, which is the last unit before you embark on your final assessments. You have the dates, it's on Moodle as to when your various tasks or activities are due, as well as the assignments, and you have the final presentation and then obviously your final submission for exams. So what we were looking at when we left off the last time was for Unit 5, where we were looking at guiding postgraduate students in drafting, crafting, and presenting their research report in the form of dissertation or thesis for examination. So we looked at working in groups, supporting the processes, learning from these peer writing groups, how to actually go about structuring the work that they need to submit for exam, your duty and your responsibility as a supervisor, guiding the student, supervising the student on what they need to do. Right. So what we are looking at today, we stopped at 5.3, which is designing and redesigning the research report, dissertation, or thesis. The reason why we say designing and redesigning is because I also gave you an example of my research, as well as students that are undertaking their masters and PhDs under my supervision. You don't just have one draft of your research report. So before you actually submit that final report for examination, you're going to go through a few drafts. Before you even go through that few drafts, you would go back and forth to your chapter 2, to your chapter 3, chapter 4. You may even go all the way back to your chapter 1, because there's things that you would have done in your 3 and 4, your methodology and actual findings of your study that you want to include in the introduction that you may not have mentioned when you first set out on the study, because a lot of things change along the way. An example would be a student of mine. She actually started her qualification in 2020. We gave her an extension because a lot of the students that registered during COVID had an issue with getting companies, because at that time, unless you were sending electronic surveys and questionnaires and stuff like that, you didn't really have contact with the companies, right? You couldn't go physically to interview anyone. We were still learning about online processes, doing MS Teams, conducting interviews via MS Teams. Also, people were just trying to get in through this the swing of things, and trying to handle this technology that was thrown at us. It existed, but we used it to a very minimal extent. And then obviously, COVID hit us. We went into lockdown, and then a lot of students also were impacted with their studies, especially when it meant that some companies were not even open, so it was difficult to even get your sample size. So my student had an issue from 2020. She registered in 2020. It's now 2024. She's just submitted, right? And then her topic was on e-commerce. The issue she experienced was obviously getting um, the companies, because she was looking at manufacturing companies, and a lot of those manufacturing companies, some of them closed, some of them retrenched. It was a mess in COVID. So her studies lagged behind for about 1.5 years until we about settled, and then we picked up again, I think, towards the end of 2022. But then she would have like almost given up. She went through a lot of drafts. And the reason why I'm saying a lot of drafts, because there's been so many changes also in the industry and with e-commerce, that she had to keep changing a lot of her stuff. And I mean, it was difficult, it was frustrating, because I mean, 4 years for a master's. But like I said, those that registered during that time, we had to be a bit more lenient and also extend, their qualifications a year or so, because of being delayed with a lot of stuff that happened during COVID and conducting the actual study. So she went through a lot of drafts, meaning that she had to rework her a literature review. Then after she finally did her results, now she had to go back to the chapter 1 and go and look at now what was drafted 2020 2021. she had to rework, redesign. So there's a lot of things that will come along where you will rework, redesign. Even your topic may change, may get redefined. Okay. So these are the things where you need to guide your students on. If any mishaps, things happen, like us going through that huge pandemic, we had to look at redesigning the research. Student had to write a lot. So you have to look at how it impacts your research, how to also put the student on the right track, because sometimes they can just go off on a tangent and just write and write and write, especially with the literature review. They can put so much in, but it deters away from the actual topic. You got to bring them back. Um, so some of the things that you look at when you are structuring. So we look at how do you structure. So there's two types that's mentioned here. Do you as a supervisor or potential supervisor, or when you were being supervised during your time as a student, did you come across two structures or any other structure that's not here? The imposed structure is something that I showed you, which was more based on a theoretical framework. The organic structure is something that's a bit more free will. You don't follow a prescribed template or format, because sometimes with the chapter one or the proposal, I would give them a structure, a template to follow, right? Then we redefine it, the proposal, into a chapter one. The chapter two also based on, like I said, the imposed structure, which is I work with a theoretical framework, and then I tell the students to build on those headings and subheadings from the theoretical framework to do a mind map of or roadmap of the entire research in the literature review. Then I also give them a template for the chapter three, and so on and so on. But the organic structure a bit more flexible, also using a lot of charts and diagrams and mind mapping tools and stuff like that, just so that you can generate a proper structure for your but it's not imposed upon you. It's not given to you by the supervisor like what I do. For engineering, we needed like a proper structure that students needed to follow. Um, so based on just those two aspects, your style of supervising or how you would like to supervise. So let's just go through that. Well, what is your experiences with getting the students to write and the style of writing? Do they have to follow a specific template, like what we do or what I do under engineering, or are they a bit more free in their structure? There's no specific headings that have to be used and so on. Anyone? Tony?
I think it's more of the imposed structure on my end. Just looking at how students have to very strictly follow the proposal template when they're writing, and then after the proposal template, we still expect them to follow a certain kind of structure. There's a very set structure and a way of doing an honors, a master's, and a PhD that is expected. It's not very organic as far as I know. We do allow for, some sort of open-mindedness and open-endedness, but that's as far as the organic structure goes.
Yeah, I think I also have a similar kind of approach to doing this. I think a lot of universities have more of that imposed structure, because there's a lot of templates and standardization that we have to go through. I think the reason we do that is because of the audits that we have to follow. Now, being in Faculty of Engineering, we adhere to the templates and the formats and stuff of EXA, which is Engineering Council of South Africa. So, and they're very strict with their templates and conforming, and, certain documentation and um, formats have to be used. So I think it's a lot standardized, and we're going through a program review right now, an internal review starting from Monday, and it's set templates. Even our entire syllabus, when it comes to the programs, our diplomas, advanced diplomas, postgrad diplomas, again, standardized processes for everything. How you do your assessments is standardized. The templates you use for your question papers, etc. So I think we more or less have a standardized approach. Well, that's from a UJ perspective. Rizmati, you want to add anything?
No, Prof, not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then moving on. So this section, like we said, chapter section 5, or unit 5 is looking more or less on how you've learned everything from unit 1 to 4, and how you are now going to supervise your students and help your students put together their entire dissertation or thesis. Which takes us to activity 5.2. As a supervisor who is or has been a dissertation writer or also a writer of research papers, think about how you design your own writing styles. Because a lot of the times what we do is whatever we learned, and when I started supervising, I learned from my supervisor on how to supervise, how to write, how to. So when I was teaching my students and guiding my students, I kind of used that, what I learned along the way, right? And then as I'm learning even now, even with this module, teaching it to you guys, I'm learning a lot more. And I incorporate that into obviously my supervision. And so it's looking at how did we take a lot of the knowledge that we've learned throughout our academic journey being students, and we try to impart that knowledge onto um, the students that we are now supervising. What is your preferred way of working? Would you advise students to do as you do? Write a paragraph in response to these questions. So I think we've kind of touched on that. What is your style? And just because I do it as a researcher and because I write in a certain way, I'm basically, imposing my ideals and how I do stuff onto the student. But obviously now I've got a bit flexible because starting off as a novice supervisor, not just a researcher, we learn and improve along the way. All right. So 5.2, you think you'll be able to handle that? What we just spoke about, write a paragraph in response to questions of how you would work with the student, how you would guide them, or is it just they must follow A, B, C, D exactly how you want them to follow it? Okay. Thumbs up, thumbs down, you good? 5.2. Okay, let's move on, right? So 5.4, guiding the writing of an argument. The role of the argument in each chapter of a research report, dissertation, or thesis. It can be argued that the argument is the central point of each chapter. Your argument actually starts at what we call your problem statement, right? And I always tell students, and I mentioned this before, students always start writing from an author's perspective first before they put in their own voice. But remember, especially when you're doing research, the reason why you want to undertake this research, investigate a specific topic, is because you've identified there's a problem. That's why we call it a problem statement. There is a gap in the research, and that's why you want to investigate this using tools, um, generate some findings to have a proper research report. So in that problem statement is the basis of your argument for the entire dissertation. And when we say argument, it means what is it that you want to do and how are you going to achieve it? The objectives you're going to use in order to achieve it. So in the problem statement, it is, well, this is how I guide my students. It is your voice as a student. So state your argument. What is the problem that this company XYZ has experienced? And therefore you want to undertake this study. Supported by what other authors have said. Because remember, at a postgraduate and master's level, honors and master's level, you are adding to the body of knowledge that already exists. Unless you're bringing about completely new research, which is mainly done in your PhD. at your PhD level, where you are creating your own conceptual framework, something completely new. So because you're adding to body of knowledge, you're going to have a lot of literature that's going to support your argument. So there we have your voice. Remember, Unit 1 was putting in your voice, and now supported by literature or supported by what other authors have said. So that's basically how I guide students that I supervise. Because once you build a good, once you build a good solid foundation on your argument, then you know that everything that you have going forward from your chapter 2, 3, 4, even developing of a hypothesis and so on, that is basically telling us that this is what we want to prove. Okay, we want to prove that there is a problem that exists, and is this company being positively or negatively impacted by it? Building the basis. So I think the strong foundation is your chapter 1, or that proposal that you start off with, where you build a solid argument. Anyone wants to weigh in on different ways in which you supervise or would like to supervise the students on how to build this argument? Generally starts off at your proposal stage. Anyone? Okay, nothing to add. So, depending on the various disciplines that we have, and it says you develop your hypothesis and your arguments, and you support it by evidence, which is supporting it by the various literatures and other authors and what has been done already. So you are adding to it, and you could be adding something a bit new to what already exists, something maybe outdated, but it shows you that research can be done in that area. You're going to draw a very good argument as to why you as a student should be embarking on this research. That is what the argument is all about. So some of the strategies that supervisors and students may find useful in writing their argument: identifying and ordering arguments. When researchers are writing chapter drafts, they may find it useful to review their work at paragraph level by making a margin note that answers these questions. What is the mini argument that you are setting out in that paragraph? So this is not only telling us what the research is about, but this goes into making a statement, supporting your claim with the reference, and putting those arguments in order. Firstly, there's the order which starts chronologically. So if you are basing a statement, right, and you state a claim saying that, if you can remember the topic that I gave you, which was the impact of TQM on organizational performance, right? So this is what I was looking at as a topic. So my argument will be based on the fact that I found that companies are using these TQM principles, but is it impacting on is it impacting organizational performance in a positive way or a negative way? Are we improving organizational performance in manufacturing sectors or service sectors, wherever the study is being conducted? Or is the use of these TQM principles not adding any value? But if it's not, what can be done to improve? Because that is what, remember, when you are doing any kind of research, getting negative results is actually a good thing. Students think that they only want positive results. You want to see positive impact, significant impact. No, the negative impact is really good in that it shows where the companies need to improve, or where institutions need to improve, and then it forms basis of your conclusions and recommendations study. So it is good to get negative results, showing that there is a negative impact. So ordering in terms of chronological order. So this is where you make a statement and Let me see if I can do this. Let me know if you can see the blank Word document that's in front of you. Can you see?
Yes, Prof.
All right. Sorry, I can't see hands up and stuff like that. So you're going to have to just unmute and speak. So the order of referencing first, or the order in which your argument, you need to base your argument. So for example, you have an author that is 2022, you have an author that's 2024, and you have an author that's 2018, right? And when I say put it in chronological order means that 2018 author said this first, right? So you can't put a reference that is 2024 and then write another sentence and put the reference as 2018, because how can 2018 support 2024? All with me? It's a logical sequence of events. 2018 occurs before 2024. 2018 occurs before 2022. Everyone with me?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, Prof.
All right.
Yes.
So that's the first way of ordering your references, right? So if you say, you state your claim and then you say, as stated by, so you make an argument and then you supporting it by literature, as stated by Smith 2018. And then you write another sentence and say, this is concurred by Andrew 2024. So that's your order, because you're now showing 2018 came first because they published that paper first. They said that first. And then 2024 follows because they now supporting what 2018 is doing. And then you will fall under 2024. So both of them are supporting what you are doing. That's a series of how you would write your argument. Everyone still with me?
Yes, Prof. We still have.
All right, cool. So that also allows you to have a good flow of your arguments, because it shows that you as a researcher know what you are doing. So when you are guiding your students, these are little things that students don't know. So I'm sure you would have noticed, those of you that are supervising at the moment, when students are writing, right? When students are writing, you will see that they have references all over the place. They've got a 2011 somewhere, then they have a 2022, then they've got a 2015, then they got a 2023, all mixed up, right? That is chaos, because you must have a smooth flow and a logical sequence of events. So this is now ordering your arguments in terms of your referencing, with reference to this thing, you using your referencing techniques to order your arguments. The other part of ordering your argument would be that you need to have very strong subclaims. So with those mind maps, if you use mind maps to supervise, right? So that also gives you a good flow, because you write down the ideas that you want to argue and you want to speak about, and then you start listing those authors that will support all your arguments. So you have to have a project plan. There's something that I want to, okay, I'll show it to you when we're done. I just want to show you my mind map of how I take my students through that whole supervisory stage and the work schedule and so on. Okay, so I always tell students, plan out every chapter that you have. Always draw or put headings, subheadings, and so on, and map out. You're going to see this phrase with the roadmap, mind mapping, flow charts, conceptual frameworks coming up all the time, because those are the type of structures that you put in place to guide the student on how to write their theses and their dissertations. Then we have supervisors and postgraduate students. could find this list very useful when drafting their report, and I also find it a bit quite useful, not a bit useful. Generalizations, sweeping claims with little or no evidence. For example, so you making a claim, right? Obviously, you need to have the evidence to support that argument or that claim, right? And here it gives you an example of a generalization of saying all women are oppressed. How do we know that? You need evidence to support that claim because that's a very general statement. All women where? What sector? What country? And oppressed in what way? So you need to check generalization, general statements, identify them, unpack them, and provide evidence. Don't just make a statement that is so open and so broad. It's so general. You need to now narrow the scope of your study or of that statement. What is it? So if we're saying all women are oppressed, when, where, how, in what form? Okay, and then support it with a reference. Stereotyping, making assumptions about people, places, things because everyone knows without providing evidence. This is stating where, and I had this, a colleague of mine actually, and it wasn't a student of mine, it was a colleague that actually had a student that, so in stereotyping, what basically happens is, we assume, and this went to examiner stage, right? We assume that the reader knows. And when I guide my students and I supervise them, I always say, write in a manner that you are telling a story to me as if I don't know. So I'm reading your work for the first time. I don't know what your topic is. So the way you write, you're going to explain to me as if you were explaining to a child about a concept. Right? I'm not saying write like a child. I'm saying, but I'm reading it for the first time. For example, Tony, um, yours is philosophy, right? Or psychology? I keep mixing the two up.
Philosophy.
Philosophy, right? I don't know philosophy little, but that's not my field of expertise. I'm an engineer. So mine will be more technical in nature the way I write. You not coming from an engineering background won't be able to understand what I am writing unless I write it in a way to make you, the reader, understand. Much like your philosophy as well, I won't know. You got to write it in a style so that the person that's reading it will understand it. You get what I'm saying? So what we're saying is, we can't assume I'm going to read your work and I'm going to you just wrote as or I wrote in a technical manner and I just assume. No, these examiners know, everyone knows what these terms are. I don't need to put a, and these students actually come back and say, but these are such common terms. Um, the person that's reading it is an engineer or from an engineering background and should be familiar with terms. No, we take it for granted that they know. Even the examiners, we take it for granted that they know. They're specialists in certain fields, but remember, engineering is quite broad. So not only the examiners, but the person that's reading your work is going to use it to reference for their work. So write in a style. That's why this whole module about academic literacy is writing for the reader as well, so that they are able to understand. I like reading and watching. Well, I watch a lot of medical programs and I read medical journals. So some of it, obviously, me not coming from a medical background, those terms and definitions and stuff, I mean, those terms they use are very, they are mind blowing, where sometimes I have to go and Google. But now, if they're already provided a list of definitions, a list of glossary, like how you would do in your research report, it makes it easier for the researcher because, I mean, the reader, because you've defined it for them already. They don't have to look up what that word or that phrase is. So, just one moment, back to. So this is where we are on the stereotyping. We don't make an assumption that everyone knows. without providing the evidence to show that this is actually happening. Okay, so everything that you are stating, unpack it and explain it in detail as if you don't know. Another example with the same colleague was that we all have the structure, like I said, the template for a chapter 3, which is showing us the method that you're going to use to conduct the study, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, your data collection tools, whether we're using questionnaires, survey, your questionnaires, interviews, observations, focus groups, etc., experiments, and so on, because our students conduct experiments as well. I don't give them, or the student doesn't write down these terms that they are using. So the person that is reading, it's assumed that they know. No, they don't know. That is why, especially at an honors level and a master's level, you will notice that they want you to explain everything. You need to put everything in detail. However, when you come to a PhD level, they tell you, you don't need to explain to me what qualitative and quantitative methods are, because you are quite advanced at this stage. The person that's reading it is quite advanced. And yes, we took it for granted that they do know, even though we still go and add the list of terms and glossaries, and we still define, but it's not as detailed as your honors and master's dissertations would be. So don't assume, always unpack and look at, is a reader going to know what these terms or the content of that paragraph is. Using either or, um, limiting an argument to two alternatives, when in fact there may be more, us and them, polarizing and dualism, oversimplifying the situation. Explore the range of complexity, introduce notions of degree, to what extent, to what degree. Show some kind of variation in your explanation. So if you are putting alternatives, know that there may not be just only two alternatives. There could be multiple alternatives. So if you are going to use a specific method, especially like data collection tools or sampling types, right? Or sampling methods that you are going to use. There's various different types. You're going to use one, either or you're going to use multiple. But you need to show that all exist. And which one did you choose for the purpose of that particular study? Faulty logic or reasoning. Logic is about one event happening after another because the first cause led to the second. Faulty logic occurs when the conclusion doesn't follow the logic or sequence of the argument and evidence. One of the examples that's given to you is, I work hard, I deserve a raise. I can be working hard and doing the wrong thing. Why do I deserve a raise? So you need to now substantiate, you putting in the logic. Yes, I work hard. Yes, I deserve a raise. But based on what? How much did you put into your work? Easy for us to say, I'm there 8 to 4. I'm there in the office 8 to 5. What are you doing in that 8 to 5 to deserve your raise? So always substantiate and show the evidence to base that I worked hard because of A, B, C, D. I deserve a raise. So a logical sequence. Then you have assuming the truth. Arguments are flawed when assumptions are taken for granted. Science is about truth, therefore my conclusion is truthful. Unpack your assumptions. We can't always assume that we are making a claim or we stating a claim or you're making an argument. It's always going to be true. So if you are saying that, or I was stating the claim that TQM principles will lead to better organizational performance, how do I know that? Scientifically, I need to prove that. That is why we're conducting the study in the first place. We want to show that it has significant improvement or significant impact on organizational performance. I'm stating something that I haven't tested yet. I'm making a statement. I need to test to say that, okay, we want to show in this particular study that it is indeed having a positive impact on organizational performance. That is why it says, base it on evidence, and that is how you make your conclusions truthful because you've conducted your study and now you can conclude that yes, it did lead to better organizational or improved organizational performance. Everyone with me? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Can we move on? All right, moving on. Signaling the aspect or stage of the argument being introduced. A resource which supervisors and students may find useful. They say, therefore I say. The moves that matter in academic writing. So basically what these authors are saying that you have to build an argument that is persuasive. You have to persuade that supervisor, that examiner, that what you are saying is indeed a solid argument for this study. So can everything that the student is saying be put into practice? So always ensure that when you are supervising the student and the student is stating claims and making arguments, are they able to put all those arguments into practice? And that is why I say when conducting the study, it makes it easier because those results that you have supports all those claims that you made in your literature review. Another thing of structuring the dissertation, the style that, the approach, I wouldn't say style that I generally guide the students on, it's not cast in stone, they don't have to use it. When you have the results of your study already in chapter 4, and you know you've built this argument in chapter 2, which is your literature, and it matches. The results matches the arguments that you put forward in your literature review. You can actually take what is there in your literature review and use it to support your results. So you're saying that this findings XYZ is supported by Smith 2018. So now it's linking up your study to show that here this argument is solid. I've got my results. Literature also supports me. Therefore, my argument is valid. So there's many ways of writing and structuring how they do their dissertations and theses based on a lot of evidence. Then you have enabling students to integrate authoritative discipline voices in their research writing. This is your voice, integrating your authoritative voice of discipline without losing your integrity. Only you know, like I said, you know your particular field, I know my particular field. And obviously, I'm going to be an authority on that particular discipline, my field of study. And it's going to come out in my writing because I would know more about my study than somebody else. Yes, they will have similar fields, but your particular topic, your particular argument, your study, only you know. So when I tell my students as well, when I'm supervising, I tell them, I've got so many honors, masters, PhD students, all come with various topics that they want to study from various different industries, all based under the engineering, well, industrial engineering field and quality field. So they will ask me, how do I write? I can only guide them and advise them on what needs to be done. But content-wise, only you as a student or the student will know what they want to put in there. So they need to tell you. That is why when you do your initial supervision, when you first meet your student and you're doing the write-up for the proposal, always tell the student, I tell my students, give me a breakdown of what you want to do. So when they give me the topic, I don't say this is what you need to follow XYZ. No, you tell me what your study entails, what you want to do, what is the problem that you have identified as a student. So you build a foundation from that. So remember, they conduct it sometimes in the industries that they are working. I'm not there in those industries. I don't know the problem that they've identified. They have to tell you. this is what we found, this is the gap, this is what I want to do as a research topic, and this is how I want to conduct the study, ways in which to conduct the study. So always the student is the authoritative voice on the content of the study. We are there to merely guide them, support them on the research journey. But the actual content, yes, we are subject experts, but the student themselves know what they are going to do because they came to us to be supervised with a specific topic. Unless they ask you for a topic, which some students do, then you guide them how to go about with that topic. Or you give them the topic and tell them, continue and bring me your ideas on way forward with that topic. Okay, so that's basically how the students put their own voices into. Well, this is from Unit 1 as well. Then it tells you how to write, the wordings that you need to use, argues that, explains that, proposes according to, supports, concurs, claims. These are the verbs that we use when we are building our argument. It also tells you what some of the words, more of the words that are used when you start an argument, when you are disclaiming something or proclaiming something, saying that this is endorsed by, this is concurred by, this is supported by, because somebody is supporting or proclaiming what your argument is. All right. Okay, then it goes on to the writing groups, giving you examples, and there's also an article that you can read. 5.6, assisting students to understand their voice in writing as a contested concept and to decide how they want to sound in their research writing. This comes back to your voice in that writing. As I mentioned, how you want to set out your study and how you want to write your voice in that. So the authority, you taking a stance as a writer. So that is why it says, what is the writer's stance on how to achieve it and developing your own personal voice? Do you actually do that when you are guiding your students? If you have, like I said, you are currently supervising or going to supervise or having been supervised yourself, give us your experience. Anyone? Are these the ways? I'm giving you examples of ways that I've done it, my colleagues have done it, other supervisors have done it, how they guide students with their supervising styles. Anything similar, anything that is different that you would like to add on guiding the students, Tony?
Prof, I have more of a question than a
Yeah.
response. I just find it absolutely difficult to galvanize motivation in students. You can teach them how to write in their own voice, but there's an element of making them want to contribute, making them want to actually make a difference with this research. Because, like you say, some students have no idea what they want to do, and then it begins by you providing them with the question, and then it's a long line of spoon feeding that follows that.
Yes.
Um, so there is that little bit of a wariness sometimes about how do you motivate the students to just take lead, without you having to leave the breadcrumbs right to the very graduation. It's a tough one.
Yeah, but that is why I gave you that example and I said, when I set out, when the student first comes in after they've registered, like I said, we already know because they give us their topic and a brief proposal or introduction. So we read it before we actually meet the student. And that is why I get the student talking first. And in that introductory session, you also find out that some of them are just doing it for qualification purposes, So that is also why the motivation is not there because they're not doing it for themselves. A lot of them come in because they have to do it for promotion or they have to do it because they send to further their studies and so on and so on. But you have those that genuinely motivated to do the study, and especially when you give, that is why I rather brainstorm a topic with a student than give them a full topic that they're not going to be comfortable with because they're not familiar with it. It may be just something that's imposed on them or just given to them just so that they can get the qualification. But no, you rather brainstorm firstly, let them be comfortable, get them to a state where they become passionate about it. Always have that brainstorming session, and then you tell the student. And if the student comes with you with a topic, right, tell me, what was the problem that was experienced? How did you even come up with the topic? What industry are we looking at? So those are the kind of things. So you just have a casual talk with them and get them talking. And once they start talking, and then you ask them more questions about their field, and I'm hoping it converts them to be a bit more motivated. You do convert some of these students, they do get motivated, but then you just get others that are, like you said, it's difficult. You basically chasing the students, and they disappear, and then they come back after 2 years and stuff like that. So those are the things that we have to deal with. But like I said, we undertake supervision training. So aside from actually doing this postgraduate diploma in research supervision, there is also a lot of workshops and trainings that are conducted by external providers for UJ. I think other institutions also have this, where it supplements this postgraduate. It's like I said, I have not done this postgraduate diploma. There's a postgraduate diploma in teaching and learning, there's higher education, and then there's this research supervision. I attend those workshops. Okay, for me, it's a bit more convenient. I don't have time to undertake another qualification. So I go for those workshops, and it teaches you as well, how to deal, not as in depth as how this modules are structured. You're actually learning a lot more, but we kind of get a idea of how to deal with students, how to motivate students. I'm not sure whether you'll actually do a module, but it should be maybe incorporated in one of the modules within this as to how to actually, deal with those students that are lagging behind, that lack motivation, that lack that passion to move forward, you know. Because for a supervisor as well, it gets frustrating to have to keep chasing students. And, I do that a lot. I send out emails, and the topic on my subject line is, what is the progress of your research? Because they just disappear, because they lose focus and they don't come back. But you as a supervisor needs to get them to that state. I think it also goes with character and how you deal with the student. Because remember, you've got a variety of students with variety of characters. Some are, like I said, very hands-on into their work, and then some just need that extra push. Yeah, I hope that helps. But like I said, if you start with an initial meeting and get the student to talk first and tell me what your research is about, what you want to do, and you will get an understanding, and you will also get a sense of how motivated the student is to actually embark on the study before they've actually done any kind of write-up. All right. So that was putting in your voice. Then we have second language writer raises questions about the voice, because this is where for second language, it's different to you're putting in your voice, but then now you have to transcribe. Because remember, we said those that are bilingual and multilingual, it becomes a bit difficult to describe what you are writing, because you may write in a certain way, especially if you come from a background that is not English as your first language. Um, so it becomes a second language. So how do you exactly write? Because I've come across students, and I think I've also given you an example where students will write in their language and then translate, and then you lose the context of it when you are translating. But what they put originally is actually their argument, but it just happens to be in a different language. And I think we spoke about this, where translanguaging, we have to look at universities when you're submitting, maybe also students submit in a preferred language because you get the context a lot better than if they convert it to English. Okay, you have another article that you can read. It gives you reflections on the writing journeys of different authors, what they had to go through during their supervision state. So put yourself in the shoes of a student right now, all of you, and tell me your research journey. So what did you learn from your supervisor that you would impart or use again to supervise your own students? Or how would you improve on those supervision skills if you've had a negative experience along the road with this research journey? Any one of you would like to give us your research journey? You as a student, what did you experience? Because remember, a lot of what we learn comes from what we see from people that are supervising us before we become supervisors, you know? Yeah, anyone wants to give their experiences?
I'm happy to give my take, but if Rizmati wants to also give it a go first, I don't want
Rizmati?
to dominate the mic.
Yeah, it's fine. It's only the two of you here. Rizmati, is there anything you'd like to add? Just take us through your research journey when you were being supervised. What are some of the takebacks that you have from your supervisor or supervisors along the way for your entire research journey? Are there take backs? Were there any negative? We don't want to know who your supervisor is. That's the best part of not knowing everyone's backgrounds right here, because everything remains anonymous. Their style of supervision. How did you embark on your research journey? What were your experiences, both positive, negative? Because I've also had negative experiences where I would always say, as a supervisor or academic, I will not do that to my students, you know? So yeah, I'm going to give you an example of what happened last year. So Rizmati, would you like to add or give us your experiences?
But nothing much. My master's one, my master's when I do my master's degree,
Yes.
the supervisor very supportive, but it was not tough. But when the time I was doing my PhD, it was a problem. It was a problem because my supervisor was not always there. Sometimes she's overseas. The feedback was always late. Sometimes I forgot that I'm doing PhD, and then after some months, she come up with a feedback.
Yeah,
It took 2 years for me to complete the proposal. Imagine
that's very long. That's very long.
2 years, 2 years to complete the proposal until I complained with the faculty, and then they changed her to and give me another supervisor. Yeah, but with the other supervisor, it took me only 6 months to complete my proposal, and
Yeah,
then
you see.
everything was cruising, and most of the things we're touching, we are doing it here. And I happened to find out from my supervisor, like I must have to sit down with him. The second one was a male supervisor. The first one was a female supervisor. So this one I happened to sit down with him and explain what my research is all about, what I want to do
Yes.
and stuff like
Yes.
the voice and like he started
Yes.
me there. So we have to change the topics and stuff and everything, but we went on smoothly. We
You
went
work
on
very well
smooth.
together. Yes.
Yes, yeah, yeah. That was my 2 lost years of my studies with the first supervisor.
And you know what? You're not alone in this journey. I can tell you, there's other students, whether it's UJ or other academic institutions, that do experience the same thing, right? I think the supervisors forget to inform the students that, you know what, yes, we have a workload because we're not only supervising, we're doing our own research, we're publishing work, we're presenting work, we travel. Much like myself, I had those same obligations. I wouldn't say obligation, but it's part of my workload. And I'm teaching, so it's a lot for us to deal with. I even was that supervisor where I would be delayed, and I learned from this, right? And I would always tell the student, like, wait until I'm back, and then we'll catch up and stuff, but not realizing you delaying the student. So it's similar experience that you've had where so what I've started doing now, improving on my skills as a supervisor, I learned from those mistakes. And I'm sure that your supervisor as well, she'll learn from her mistakes as well. I was an up and coming supervisor, and I said, no, students were not realizing student has a certain time limit to finish the qualification, right? And we holding the students back. So it's little mistakes which turn into big mistakes. You hold the student back from completing the qualification in the required time. Like I said, I used to do that as well. But what I do now is I have set deadlines, like I said, a working schedule. Even if I'm traveling or I'm not available, um, I will give the students some work to do in that time so that they are working. And then by the time I come back or I'm finished with my conferences or whatever it is that I am not available for the student for, they will have produced something in that time and not wasted just waiting for me. You know, the work must always be ongoing. So that is why you have a proper schedule for the student. Tony, you want to give us your experience?
Similarly to Rizmati, I also had two supervisors which were day and night from one another. My first supervisor who took me through my honors, that first supervisor who was probably supposed to lay down a lot of the foundational stuff, tell me, like you're saying, Prof, what their workload looks like, what is expected of me. They really didn't do a lot of that. It was almost as if I was expected to know a lot of what was going on my
Exactly.
own
Yes.
from the jump, and that was a bit of a scary one. But more than that, I had a research project in mind that I've obviously took to his office, and it was completely changed. So there was a lot of imposition in terms of the structure,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
it put me off as a student over time because I was
Yes.
doing more and more.
Demotivated. Yeah.
Yeah, I was further and further away from what I thought I would be doing.
Yes.
And what made it worse is that in that year I lost my father. So I ended up just like kind of being thrown off completely when it was submission time. But fortunately, the department was very understanding, and I got an opportunity to, get almost an interruption of studies or an extension, or rather get another opportunity to submit my research, uh, which cost me an extra year of my life. But I mean, that helped me so much because the supervisor I got after that was then the person who would kind of form who I am now as a supervisor myself. I learned so much from him in
Yes.
terms of how to deal with students, in terms of how to also make the supervision collaborative, a little more collaborative, and not so dominating. That was a wonderful thing, and he grew me in terms of my honors, masters, and PhD. Yeah, very grateful for that.
Oh, brilliant. Like I said, we improved on that, and now we will improve on the way that we supervise after our experience with supervisors. And then you hear a lot from your colleagues about supervision and stuff like that, and about students. And um, I had a similar experience. I'm having a similar experience. So my master's as well. I had a very dominant supervisor at that time. She was up and coming supervisor. I was her first student, as I mentioned to you guys. Um, so she felt like she had to be like a kind. but it's kind of like the supervisor you need that will push you in your face all the time. I want this by this time, so push, 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 push. I finished my master's, I think, in a year and 2 months, right? I mean, I'm grateful to her. She pushed me and she had that drive, but also you got to look at the students' capability as to how much they can do. You want the output, you want to push, but um, don't push too hard as well. So she took me step by step, but like I said, right, always sitting with her, always. She was the type that will sit with you as you even writing. So it's like you sit with her in her office and you do the work. She'll be doing her work, so she knows you're sitting and you're working, so you're very, very hands on. It was kind of suffocating as well, so I learned a lot from that, and I learned to improve on that because I felt suffocated as a student and it was too much, kind of overloading me, overwhelming me as well. When it came to the PhD, it was completely different. I had 2 male supervisors, and being an academic also, they also took it for granted that, okay, you did a master's, you know how to do research. So I can physically count in the 4 years that I did my PhD, how many times I actually met or consulted with my supervisors. They had just left me to basically self-manage, write up, dude, hardly saw me. I even presented at conferences. We prepared papers, everything. They will just review everything done online, but actual consultation was very minimal because it was, like I said, taken for granted that, yes, I knew research. Being an academic myself, I know the process, but it's not always the case. You still need that guidance. You need that reassurance, and you also need that time with your supervisor because you also need to know that you're on the right track. So if I'm going to give you a chapter 1 or 2 or 3, or my results, if my results came back and you just review and stuff, you review and tell me, give me full feedback, not just, no, it's fine, it's, what you're doing. I'm doing a second PhD, again, another male supervisor. Oh, he's left me completely. I've only seen him when I registered. I had just one consult. I think this is my second year of study. I'm finishing because obviously it's easier now because I've been through one PhD. He just left me. It's like, but you already know you're an associate professor. Okay, yes, that is taken for granted. But there were certain models I was using which should have been more his expertise, but you should have been guiding me because it's a new model that I'm using. I needed a bit more guidance because then it was to be less reading for me to do and, train me a bit on the tool, the specific tool, these AI tools that are out there. So yeah, I've just saw him when I registered, when I was ready to submit my questionnaire, when I gave him the questionnaire for review, and I just had a consult with him now because I'm on my final write-up. Well, I'm not final write-up, I'm on chapter 4, analyzing my results. I'm, almost at the final write-up. So as you go along, I think they kind of take it for granted, or supervisors take it for granted that, you've been on this journey, you've gone through a master's, you know how to write a research project, you know how to write a research report, you know how to structure your chapters, go with it, with minimal supervision. But I think I also still learn from it in that I don't do that to my students. I still don't do that to my students where I just leave them. They get lost, they get overwhelmed, and then they just stop. Like Rizmati just said, 2 years he sat, he didn't know what he was doing, he forgot he even was doing a PhD. And then you lose your students. You also lose. That's how students get demotivated. Like you said yourself, also, some point you were demotivated. I felt a bit demotivated as well, but we push on if you really want the qualification. And then in Rizmati's case, he ended up getting somebody new who he meshed well with, works well with, and now on his way. Or Rizmati, you've already got your PhD? Or you still doing your PhD?
Yeah, I'm still doing it, but it's almost finished.
Almost finished. Okay, so
Yeah,
you
it's
made
almost
it.
finished. Yeah. But the current supervisor, he got his own disadvantages as well because his tone. Hey, his tone is like what we have said. He's taking advantage that I'm doing PhD. I've done masters, and then now he's taking advantage.
You know.
When there is something that I need to know, he will just say, "Smart, we are doing PhD. You can't ask me that." Something.
It's
So
taken for granted, Rizmati, that you doing a PhD, so you already know how to do research. It's
yeah,
not.
so you can't ask me such questions.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
I've come across that. I've come across that as well with the other supervisors. Yeah, the students need that guidance and that support. It makes no difference whether it's at a master's level or PhD level or postdoctoral level. They still need that support. You guys still need that support, even if you're going to be studying further. Okay, so you get the idea about taking that research journey and learning from others, learning from your own mistakes, and obviously making the research journey a bit easier for the students. Um, so there are reflections on people's writing journey. So that is why I took you through your writing journey when you were doing research. So you guys can read through this journey, and about what other scholars have to say about their journey doing research, right? You guys can even brainstorm amongst each other. Have your own. You'll have this working group that you'll developed, and you'll have been working on Saturdays and stuff like that. Speak amongst yourselves with the rest of the students that are not present here today, and just reflect on your journey. Reflect, and it's a good task in that an activity for you to do on your own. If you'll reflect on your journeys, and then you will see you'll have similar types of challenges or similar types of opportunities that were given to you, and also whatever what you don't have in common, you learn from it. Okay, you can learn from each other, you can learn from that research journey, and then it molds you and grooms you for being a better supervisor. Any questions up until this point? Okay, we good. Do you want to take a break or we move on? Can we
I'm
maybe just
happy to
take
push through.
Okay, no, I just want to get some water, so give me 5 minutes. We just take a 5 minute break and then I'll be back now. I'm not going to stop the recording, just 5 minutes for me to get some water. Thank you.
All right, not a problem, bro.
All right, thank you. We can continue. Okay, so this developing your voice, being a tall order, like I said, it's a about your ideas, your beliefs, your experiences, and you being the authority on the subject matter. As much as we as supervisors are subject experts, that's why you are given supervisors, but you must write in a style where you are certain of the claims that you are making. I always, when a student makes a claim, I always ask them why. Explain this, why. So once a student, you ask them why, and you keep asking them why, it gives them an opportunity to build a better argument as to why are you making this claim. So if my students can keep answering me, and I keep when I ask them why, it's not to tear them down or to say that what you are doing is wrong. No, the practice, and I always tell them beforehand, the practice of me asking you why you've put down the statement or why you're stating this claim is so that your voice can be heard, because as much as you're going to put references and stuff like that, I need to know that what you are saying about that subject or that content, you are confident enough to state that claim and say, yes, this is why I am doing it. And you must have confidence in the work that you are producing. Because like I said, at the end of the day, it is you telling the story, you building that argument, and you telling that examiner or that reader, this is the work that I am producing. Be confident in everything that you are doing, especially when your voice needs to be heard. Choosing and using visual representation. So aside from writing and the way in which you write, the style in which you write, it's also how you present your work, the visual presentation, in terms of having the structures, having it in chapters and having it broken down into paragraphs and subsections and so on, using bullets, using numbering. So putting some kind of organization and structure into that template and how you visually represent the work. Also putting in charts and diagrams and tables and explaining what these must be directly related. There's sometimes students, just for it to look nice, they find a nice diagram, they put it in, but it has no relevance to the study. It must be directly related to the study. So whatever you are adding must be relevant to the study, charts, diagrams, tables, and so on. Even if it's stuff that you've generated yourself, put it in, but also understand why you are putting in your those tables and those figures and those charts and so on. Also, the type of font that you use, your type of font, size, color, all those. All right, so everything that is visually appealing. And I think we spoke about this, the type of font and the color of the font. And, we even spoke about, I think, Tony, you were the one that mentioned something about if an examiner was colorblind, okay, using colors and stuff like that, it would not serve any purpose. And then I said, I like using a lot of color, to represent my work, and because that's just how I am. People just like to put a lot of pictures and charts, and I like to draw a lot of like mind maps and stuff to show my work, being more visual than textual. So it's how you actually present your work and the type of things that you put in. Your foreground and background of how you present the work in terms of your cover page. So generally with us, what we do with the cover page, now students use watermarks and backgrounds and stuff like that. Again, as engineers, a lot of standardization, very boring, but anyway, it needs to be followed because of that Engineering Council of South Africa auditing us. We have standardized templates for a cover page with the UJ logo and so on, right? There's no backgrounds, no watermarks, no pictures. I know students like to put pictures and make it look nice. Yes, have all that in text in your actual work. But for us, I'm just talking about for our faculty, this is how we do it. We have standardized templates when it comes to how to present your cover page. So I'm not sure. And then it tells you what goes on the cover page, which is your title, your biography. Generally, we either put a biography in the front or biography right at the end. That is your personal biography. But I don't think all faculties maybe follow that structure. It just depends on what faculty it is. Even for publication purposes, they put biographies and stuff like that, right? So it kind of gives the reader the opportunity to know who the person that wrote the work is, you know? So you give a brief biography of yourself, even in your dissertation as well, how you write up those sections. So we have a standard template, and our standard template has the UJ logo, which has the title, sorry, your topic, then it has the degree, the department, the faculty, student name, student number, all that, right? So that's all the information, like it says that it's required on your, and then we have, after the cover page is the declaration of plagiarism and so on. We also go as far as telling you the size of the margins on either side. I think it is 1.5 on either side. It's justified margins, so it's equal. So it's just showing you presentation of work, what your front cover, back cover. We don't actually have a back cover, so it just ends with a biography, the reference list and the biography. Okay. So this is some of the stuff that we look at. Giving you an example of what pictures and stuff should be used. Also the quality. So when you're students and you're advising students, and this is the mistake that some of us make, students take pictures, even if it's a diagram that relating to their studies, like say for supply chain, and they want to show a simple supply chain, they will go and Google and go into Google Images and take the image and put it into their work. So now we need to guide the students on that. You have to obviously source it, reference it, and you have to, there's a specific app that you use where you have to seek permission to use those Google images. Do you know that you can't just copy and paste any Google image into a report? You actually have to have permission. And then I don't have the link right now, but there's a way in which you get permission to use those diagrams and figures and pictures and stuff that's related to your study to put it in your research report. So you can't just take any picture off the internet and put it in there. So that's something new that I learned as well, and which started guiding my students that unless if you're drawing it, then you're drawing it and it's original diagrams and flowcharts and stuff, then you put author, you don't put your name. You call yourself an author and you say author 2024, and then you label it, right? You've referenced yourself because saying that this is something new that I learned. You can impart that into you supervision style and, for your students. So anything that you are doing originally drawing on your own, you put down author, the word author 2024, reference it, and you referencing yourself. But again, images and stuff, you can't just, there is, don't take Google Images. There is a website that you can go on to, which gives you permission to use these specific images. Also, I know that students use AI tools. We use AI tools if you're generating images and stuff like that and tables. Again, reference it with you as the author and state that you've used generative AI to generate those images. Everyone with me? So there's a lot to learn now, especially with technology, that you can't just take pictures. I mean, I'm sure you've come across that, but students just take pictures and put it in. But did you know, as a supervisor, your students know that they're not supposed to just copy and paste even an image. I mean, we're all guilty of doing it, but we're not supposed to. If I get the website, then I will share it via email so that you know that you need to get permission, use the image, and then, get permission to use the image and then use it in your research report, whether it's even a publication. The type of images you use, the clarity, it must be readable. It can't be something that's blurry. Even charts that you are generating, everything must be very clear. The visual design of your final version of your research report will be referred to in the final section of this unit. It's also how you will present your work when you are doing your exam for this, right? Activity 5.3, while you are reading and summarizing information in the table, we're looking at this table that was given to us above, all right, on what is required of cover pages and so on. So 5.3 is based on that. Think about how the PhD candidate uses each of these to support their argument that from Mtumo, how they support their argument on material designers' positions as students and as teachers in different ways when they prepare material, with possible consequences for their investment in the material. Think about students whose research you are supervising. Could tables, charts, diagram, photos, drawings, etc., with or without annotations, help them to present their data and findings and build better arguments? In one paragraph, reflect on the possible value of including visual elements in students' research reports, dissertations, or theses. Firstly, ask yourself, what is the need to actually have that particular figure in your work? Is it supporting your argument? Is it supporting your research? Is it supporting your findings? Because generally in your chapter 4, your research and your results and findings, this is where you will have your charts and diagrams that support your argument. So you're giving a pictorial view of what your findings are, because you're still going to give a narrative of what is in that diagram. Any pictures and diagrams and images that you want to use, even if it's in your literature review, you need to know why you are using it, why are you putting it there? Is it adding value to your research? Is it talking to your research? Like I said, you don't just put it there because it looks nice. So it looks pretty and it makes your work stand out because it's colorful and so on, right? There's got to be a reason as to why your student or you as a researcher are putting specific charts, diagrams, photos, and so on. And it may be visually appealing, but how is it impacting your research? Is it linked to your research? Because you can't put unnecessary images in their tables if it's not speaking to your research. Always guide your students as to, is it relevant for your study? So writing in a paragraph on how your students' use of visual elements will possibly add value to their study. I think that's fairly simple. Activity 5.3, you think you can handle that? Even if you put yourself in the shoes of the student and you write from your research journey, if you added charts and diagrams, what value did it add to your research? So look at it from that context, okay? Writing a strong conclusion, right? So how do you write a conclusion? How do you supervise? Okay, look at yourself as a student first, how you base your results or present your results in a conclusion. Because remember, you've given us your results and findings, you're now at the final stage where you are concluding on those findings, right? So give us your journey as a student, how you drafted that section, and as a supervisor, how you guide your student on summarizing and putting everything into a conclusion. And obviously, I will give you my ways of doing it. Anyone?
I can give it a shot, Prof. With
No problem.
conclusion, I tend to like to So I think of the conclusion as a mirror reflector of the introduction. Whatever the student has set out in the introduction, they need to, by the conclusion, say whether they've done it or not. So if the aim of the research was to do a certain thing, by the conclusion, you need to be able to reflect on whether you've done that thing or not. And not only that, but I mean, there's obviously the element of summarizing and trying to bring everything down to one kind of paragraph or one chapter. But I
Yeah.
like to teach students to not try do conclusions as in chapter one I did this, in chapter two I did this, in chapter three,
Yes.
which is very robotic. I like them
Yes.
to give a synthesized kind of idea of what happens within the conclusion, one that captures everything in cohesive manner without breaking it up into the individual chapters. So that's what I like to do. I like to say whatever it is. If you said you would argue for something, by the conclusion, you should say you have argued for something. If you said there was a question that must be answered, the conclusion must be a mirror reflection of that.
That question has been answered. No, 100%. I also believe that it must be, because whatever you're stating, because remember in that introduction, you proposed that this is what I want to do. Your methodology is how you want to do it. Now, your results showed that you did it. Conclusion is what was the outcome after you've conducted the study, right? So, I also go with a similar approach, which is that mirror effect, because whatever you stated in your research questions and objectives, have you now achieved it? And that's how you write up your conclusion in line with those objectives, in line with those research questions. A lot of the students will say, like you said, this is what was done in chapter one, this should know. We want to know, based on the results that you have you met your objectives? So achievement of your objectives. Have you answered your research questions? Have you closed the gap for that problem that you've identified? All that must be stated in your conclusion, which ends up being, I think, about 10 pages or so, depending on whether it's a minor dissertation, full dissertation, or full thesis that you are doing. Rizamati, anything you'd like to add?
No, Prof. No, nothing to it.
Okay, thank you. So yes, like I said, similar approach where I would also use, but there's other supervisors, or there's other ways, not only other supervisors, but there's other ways that students can be guided on how to do a conclusion. Again, giving them templates and stuff, but I think they need to be a bit more free in that conclusion is definitely more of your voice, more of your argument, and more of your confidence in that I've achieved these objectives, the results have shown this, and now I am concluding to say, yes, this was ABCD was concluded, it's done, we've achieved that objective. So it's how you construct that conclusion, and building a strong conclusion to say that we've met all the objectives, we've answered all these questions. Hold on for me one moment. Okay, so that is guiding the student on how to draft the conclusion. Some of the ways of crafting your final chapter. Guidelines being original conclusion. Are your conclusions significant in terms of forming a good debate and argument? Your contributions will possibly come from the data. Because like we said, you've got your results now. So this is the outcome of the study. You're reporting on the outcomes that you've received from your results. Advancing thinking in a particular field. Have you carried an argument further, perhaps providing new insights? What new did you find while you were conducting the studies? Remember, I said it's existing, but then you may also come across new approaches and then put that into your conclusion as an improvement or recommendation. Advancing someone else's ideas. Have you taken someone else's thinking to new heights? So this could have been a research where you found a study similar to yours, but you improved on it. So you've taken it to another level because maybe that research was done in 2015. Your research is now being done in 2023 or 2024. You've added something new over the years. Unknown material in new ways. Perhaps you are applying ideas in a different context. Is your conceptual framework distinctive and different from what is already being there? New evidence in an old area? New sources of data. Yes, with technology now, there is so many different sources of data, plus there's also the AI apps that are being used. Can you make a methodological contribution? Well, that's the reason why you're conducting the research. And what about the evaluation of the entire research report? What worked, what didn't work, and what did you learn from it? And can you draw any recommendations and improvements from it? Then it speaks about your thesis. Okay, and I think the thesis as well with the dissertation, like we said, it mirrors. And it's not only the thesis, it's all research. It's where you should have that strong connection between your conclusions and what you brought about in your introduction. Okay, much like what Tony and I were just mentioning about the mirror effect of what was done in your introduction and what you have produced in your findings and your conclusions. Like we also said, providing action, which is these are recommendations that can be made to those industries or companies where you conducted the study to say that this is what was found while you conducted the research. This is where improvements can be made. This is suggestions and recommendations that also can be given to that company to improve. Some of the students feel that they're just doing it for academic purposes, get the qualification, and they move on. They don't, when you produce the work, when you're publishing the work, remember you're putting the work out there for people to read. And it forms like an improvement plan where those that are reading your articles and those companies can also use it for improvement tools. I've actually had research where companies have come to me to ask me, can I use this framework? Can you set up, I look at quality management systems, so we work with ISO 9000 family of standards, right? And they will ask me, come in with your expertise and help us set up a quality management system in this manufacturing plant and so on. So you're using your research now and you've recommended and now you've actually implemented. So your work is not wasted. It's hands-on, using a more practical approach in that research that you've conducted, you've now you've implemented it somewhere and you've added some value in an actual industry or company. Which takes us to activity 5.4. Write a paragraph in which you summarize what guidance you might provide your postgraduate students about writing and concluding the chapter. Because remember, that's your final chapter, and then you put the entire draft together, right? Any questions up until this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. All right. 5.9 takes us now to what goes into an abstract, because once everyone thinks you write, you don't. An abstract is also known as an executive summary. It's the last thing that needs to be written. Reason why it's the last section that needs to be written, even though it's the first section that goes into your dissertation or thesis, it's a summary of your entire research from chapter 1 right up to your conclusion. So some people may have 2 chapter 2s, 2 chapter 4s, whatever the case is. You start at chapter 1, you end up at your conclusion and your reference list. You're summarizing everything. So what actually you need to guide your students. So what, again, I have a rubric where I show the students what actually goes into an abstract, where I start with, you give me 2 lines of your introduction. Because remember, with an abstract, it has to be not more than 350 words, right? Not more than 350 words, meaning that maximum is 350 words. For a thesis, I think it's 500 words, right? So you have to look at firstly the number, the word count that you have, and then you have to look at breaking down that 500 words into sections. So what I generally do is with the students, I take them through, so I'm going to unshare and go back to that Word document. Let me know when you can see the Word document. It's still the same document.
Yeah, it's up, Prof.
My apologies. Then you have, you don't put in your problem statement, your objectives, and so on. You introduce it with the purpose of conducting the study. Right? What was introduce it, purpose of doing this study. Then you look at, we go straight into, you don't even put your literature review and stuff because your purpose of the study tells us what you want to do. Then you go into your methodology. You may think 500, 350 to 500 words is a lot. Actually, by the time you write, you will end up reducing because it's not a lot for an abstract, right? So then you use them, then you explain the methodology, you summarize the methodology in a few sentences, what method you used for the purpose of conducting this study. And then you have what were the findings and results that came out of the study. You don't have to put everything, you just summarize what were the main aspects, which is, like we said, directly related to the objectives of your study. So have you achieved your objectives? Show us the findings and the results. And then a few lines concluding the abstract. And it ends there, right? So I take them through how to draft the abstract once they've done the entire dissertation or thesis, right? So it's just how you guide them on summarizing that entire abstract. Then you look at, so I gave you a bit of the structure, the length, like we said, 350 if it's a master's, 500 if it is a thesis, balancing your word budget. Then you have to look at, there's it here. Introduction, method, your research findings, and then discussion, which is your conclusion, right? Gives you a sample abstract, and I'm sure you've done abstracts, you've done publications because you've been on this research journey for yourself. So supervising, guiding, giving them guidelines on how to structure the actual abstract, which is a summary of the entire research project. Everyone with me? Can we move on? Now we move on to preparing and presenting the research report, dissertation, or thesis for examination. So this is where I say that you have to have a first draft before we can do a full final draft that is submitted for examinations. But there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. We have to ensure that we have a proper format in place for the entire draft, final draft, right? The first draft. Headings, subheadings, your content from your abstract, your cover page, abstract, contents page, introduction. Well, obviously, then you're going to have your list of figures, list of tables, list of, or your terms and definitions, or list of glossary, whatever you calling that terms and definitions, and putting it all together with your chapter 1 to your right up to your conclusion. How you present the work, like it says, extra white spaces, the examiners don't take kindly to that. So you have to look, you as a supervisor know the assessment policy for your respective institution or respective faculties. You need to adhere to those assessment policies for postgraduate examinations and ensure that all the documents are in place. Proper structure for the entire dissertation. Also, you have to ensure that the entire dissertation or thesis has to be language and technical edited. So spell check, grammar check. So it needs to go to a proper editor. Editors take up to 3 weeks to edit your work. You pay an editor to do your work, do your editing. So it goes for language and technical editing. Technical editing is where they look at formatting and stuff like that. So even the presentation of your work, the type of font you're using, your headings, your subheadings, how you've structured it, how you've put your tables. So even how you label your diagrams, figures, the labeling of it is below. For tables, the labeling is above. So these are the structures that are put into place. The type of referencing that you use, the style of referencing in terms of whether you're using Harvard, IEEE, APA and stuff like that. So it just depends on your discipline and the type of referencing method or referencing style that you are using. All right. Also, you have to look at consistency. So if you are saying the word company, you use the word company throughout the entire dissertation, for example. You can't use company and then use the word organization. You're describing the same thing, but you've got to be consistent in that. Use the word company throughout. If you want to use the word organization, use that word throughout. Also, you have to look at setting the, what is it called? The type of language that we use. Language preference, whether we are using US or UK English or South African English. So you cannot put organization with a Z and then you start using organization with an S. These are the types of things that we look at when it goes for language. That is why you do language editing. They will look at the consistency of what you are writing, certain words and so on. So it mentions language editing, checking and stuff like that. That's where you need to have a proper editor. So it's guiding the student on putting. So what I generally do with my students when they're ready with their first draft, it's not a final draft, I sit with them with the entire draft. I give them about 2 or 3 hours. When you're ready for submission, we sit together, whether it's online or physical, and we read through the entire document. We project it. I sit in a classroom, or I do have, well, at that time when I was HOD, I had a projector and a TV, and it was easy to work with. Project it, we go through the entire document before we send it to the editor for editing. Then we look at, we happy with it, or the student needs to make some corrections before we send. Once it's at the editor sends it back to us, we do a proofread, we do the amendments, do a proofread, and then we send it for examinations. Now, throughout this entire supervision process, before we end Unit 5, you need to also guide the students on all the processes that go into the final submission, starting with our processes are approval of the title, approval of the study, approval of the title. Then your research instrument must go for ethical clearance. So you have you have to submit an application to ethics committee with all the relevant documents, required documents, not relevant documents, required documents. Then, like I said, goes through the final, the first draft, goes through editing, goes through final draft, nomination of assessors or examiners. Student needs to know that these are all the processes. You need to give them the dates at which the committees will serve so that they can have their documents ready to submit to those various committees. So throughout their academic or their research journey, when they are preparing and doing all these investigations and write-ups, there are stages in between of those processes that they need to follow along the way. So you as a supervisor needs to ensure that the student has a smooth research journey. Like with us on Saturday, we actually have all the masters and PhD students coming in, where we have so the deputy chair of the faculty ethics committee is actually in our department, so she is going to do a presentation on what needs to be done when it comes to applying for ethical clearance. So if you have a session like that, put all your students, even if students you supervising and you got about 4 students, have a session, bring them together, whether it's online or physical, take them through all these stages. It goes to faculty higher degrees, it goes to ethics committee. It gets to go through a nomination of assessors where you select the examiners. We're going through that now. Prepare your documents, have all that ready. So this is you preparing the student throughout that 2 or 3 years that they are in that system with their research journey. All right. Which concludes Unit 5 and takes us to Assignment 5. So Assignment 5 is just before your final assessment. So it comes in two parts. You are required to try out one of the suggestions made by Kemmler and Thompson above, or Lamberti and Wenzel, or Badenhorst. Badenhorst was very common. With regard to the voice in academic writing, with one or more of the students that you have supervised. Then write a short reflective 500 words or of its actual or potential usefulness to research writers. If you're not currently supervising anyone, then reflect critically on suggestions related to your own research and writing voice. Okay, much like what Rizamati had said, it's how your voice comes across. Everything that you have learned up until this point, is it useful for you as a supervisor, and what can you actually take out of this? So that is how you're going to reflect. You are reflecting on what is your take back from everything you've learned from Unit 1 to Unit 5, either as a supervisor or if you are not supervising at the moment, what you would have liked your supervisor to have done. B, the reflective account will be assessed in terms of evidence of understanding of suggestion that you have chosen and of critical reflection, and this entire thing is 10 marks. The second part of it is you may choose either Kemper's example abstract that was provided, or a thesis abstract from your own discipline. A, you can choose to present your analysis in the form of annotations on the abstract or in a short report, or to do both. Your response will be assessed in terms of your use of Thompson's advice or your own experience of how did they write that abstract. So you're going to reflect on how your students, so you can use an abstract from a student that you are supervising, or you can use the abstract that is given to you in 5.9 and reflect on it. Okay, and then obviously you have the rubrics and how you will be marked for each of these sections, right? I would have liked, if I can, I'm not sure, I don't want to go through this now. I will try and set up a session that does not clash with any of your modules. For me to just go through it, I just need like 30 minutes. Even if it's not a Thursday, if it's a Wednesday, I'm fine with that. Monday and Tuesday, I've got lectures. But I just want to go through your oral assessment and the portfolio submission for your final exam. But I need to go through it with everybody. I want to make sure that everyone is on the right track. So up until Unit 5 and Assignment 5, are you good? And I'm hoping that those that have not attended today will look at the recordings, and then if there's any issues, they can do consultations. Tony?
Yeah, Prof, I just wanted to say, in line with the additional lecture that you want to have, I would suggest that we stick to Thursday, because there is a Wednesday class, which I'm also part of, that is quite a big group, and it will likely, have a lot of us from.
No. It's your availability. I'm just saying Wednesdays I was free, Thursdays I'm free. But it's not a lecture. I just want to take you through what you need to do for the summative assessment. Remember, it's part 1, which is your presentation, and then
Yes.
part 2, which is the physical submission of a final report. So I just
Okay.
want to take the whole class through that process. But up until now, you have from unit 1 to unit 5. So maybe next week, Thursday, I can set that up with Dr. Lorenzo. And it's not even going to take me 30 minutes to take you through your assessment. It's not a lecture. It's just to take you through your assessment and what needs to be done for the final
Absolutely.
assessment.
I
Yeah.
think that should be fine. Maybe if we could ask Dr. Lorenzo to also send something on Moodle, because I do see that there is some activity, even if it's
There's
an
activities and
announcement.
communication. Yes.
Yes, even if it's an
I'll speak to
announcement,
him. Not a
to leave
problem.
it there, yeah, and then
Yeah.
people will catch on from there also.
No, brilliant. I'll actually do that. I'll speak to him now, or I'll speak to him tomorrow morning, and we'll set that up. Like I said, just 30 minutes to take you through what you need to do for your final assessment. The presentation, the oral presentation, and then the written report.
Absolutely. Thank you, Prof.
Okay. Anything from your side before we close for today? I'm going to stop the recording.
Nothing from my side. I don't know if Rizamati has anything, but
Rizamati,
I'm good.
anything?
Thanks.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay.
You good? Okay. Anything that you get